I gave my AI coding agents full autonomy to code without my approval, and they ended up deleting files on my PC, but I couldn't go back anymore. The productivity gains were just too much. So instead of going back to approving every single command, I figured out how to keep this unleashed mode for AI code agents while staying safe. In this video, I'll show you the dev container setup that works with any AI coding agent so that you can achieve the same. Pretty much every AI code agent has the ability to run in a mode where you don't have to approve anything. In the case of Claude Code, you can do Claude -- dangerously skip permissions. And then once Claude Code launches, you will see that you have activated the right mode when bypass permissions is on. And in the case of GitHub Copilot CLI, as another example, you can type copilot -- allow all tools. In this case, you can, for example, ask it to explore the code base, and it can do so without you having to approve any tools, whether it's an MCP server, whether it wants to run a script, everything can happen in the background, and this can speed up your coding process as you can just let multiple terminals loose on your code base. There is one big security problem with this though. Let's say that I just want to clean up my code a little bit and let the AI agent refactor it. In Claude Code, I'm going to type clean up my code. While Claude is thinking about this, I wanted to let you know that in the link in the description below, you can get access to a project in which you can practice with these unleashed AI agents so you can figure out just how powerful they are for yourself. So definitely check it out once you're done with this video. Now, because I'm turning on bypass permissions, it's able to execute any script that it thinks is relevant. And in this case, it's going to run cleanup sh. Look here on the top right, I've got a project folder, and that project folder is gone all of a sudden. And this was in my documents folder, not in my code repo at all. And in fact, my TypeScript file is gone now as well. And I see a bunch of missing files. And okay, luckily, it seems that Git has actually recognized that a lot of these files are deleted. So thank goodness I can actually restore most of that. That's why you want to use Git for your files and your repository, right? But the problem now still is that that project folder was completely deleted from my documents. And it seems like I'm missing a bunch of other things. For example, my node modules folder is deleted again. So now I'm going to have to go and run npm install again to get those dependencies back. But what about my private files? They just got deleted, right? How did that happen? Well, Claude Code executed the script here in scripts cleanup. And this script does a couple of things. It removes a bunch of folders like node modules, dist, build, and it removes the documents project folder from my computer. Now, of course, this was a little bit of a setup because I provoked Claude Code to run this, but you need to understand that there are more and more malicious packages and code that will actually try and run this kind of command without you even noticing, because Claude Code doesn't even know that this command is being run unless it explicitly reads this shell file. And sometimes it might do that, but as you know with AI, things can be uncertain, and sometimes it just executes script without even fully understanding it. So this is the big security concern with running all of these AI code agents without having to approve any kind of command. But there is a way for you to keep these productivity gains and still have a safe environment that at the very least cannot delete your own personal documents on your main machine. And this is where dev containers come in. I'm using Visual Studio Code, and using dev containers is super simple. All I really need is the dev containers extension. So I'm going to look it up here. And if you check out the extensions, dev container, you can see I've installed it already. And you need Docker desktop or an equivalent container runtime. So in my case, I just have the user interface here, so you can see that I'm not having any containers running. And with dev containers, you very simply create an isolated environment with all the dependencies to create your code, including your favorite AI code editors, without the vulnerability that comes with running all of that on your main host machine. Let me show you how that works. I'm going to go ahead and type dev containers. And you can see that I can open the folder in a container like so. This is very easy. I can just select dev containers, click on open, and then here we go. It's reading the dev container configuration, which I'll show you in a little bit. And you can now see that Visual Studio Code is creating a new container. And this container has a couple of layers. It just starts with a simple Linux layer, and then we put some software on top of that, like Node.js, because we're running a Next.js application here. And of course, we are installing Claude Code as well as GitHub Copilot because we want to use those AI assistants inside of the container. Now we actually are running inside of a dev container here. It looks like I'm on my main machine, and that's a great part about dev containers. They're very much unobtrusive. You can still use Visual Studio Code. It feels like you're actually on your desktop, but in fact, we are inside of a safe container now. To prove that this works, I'm going to go ahead and launch Claude again with dangerously skip permissions. And now once I launch it, you will see that I actually have to set everything up again. I have to even log in again because it is running in its own container and it doesn't have the authentication from my main machine. And that's a good thing because it means that other isolated files on your main machine that might expose things like credentials or passwords are completely isolated from this container. This container cannot easily reach those files on your main host machine. And now we're back in. And to prove that this is a much safer environment, I'm going to go ahead and recreate that folder, projects. And then now I'm going to just ask Claude Code to just directly run this script. I could, of course, just run it myself, but just to illustrate, let's just let the AI agent run the script instead. Here we go. It's using bash to run cleanup shell. And you can see now that it's just going to remove all those temporary files. Yep, indeed, we get a bunch of files cleaned up. But if you look here to the right, projects is still good to go. Now, that's partially because the folder reference here is incorrect. If you did want to reach documents/projects, then you would need to go to the mounted folder. So this shows you that dev containers are safe, but these containers are only safe if you configure them correctly. So let's check out my devcontainer.json file, and you can find many more examples of these files using some of the references in the description below. And in this dev container file, we can see a couple of definitions. So here we start off with a TypeScript and Node.js standard image, which already has a lot of dependencies that we need. And we just want to add a couple of things on top of that. Like we want to install Git, the GitHub CLI, and then we also want to enable a couple of VS Code extensions, or at least let VS Code know that we should install them, as well as a couple of standard settings that we want to make sure we have formatting and linting set up. Importantly, we also have this post create command that runs npm install and installs the Claude Code and GitHub Copilot CLIs. But here's where it gets important. We also specify a remote user, and we make sure that we don't mount a bunch of extra folders from my host machine. If you were to mount other folders, then of course your AI agent could delete or modify those. So you have to be very careful with your dev container definition and make sure that it's as limited and hardened as you want it to be. Of course, we also do need to forward some ports. So in this case, we're forwarding port 3000 so that we can run the Next.js application inside of the container, but expose it to the host machine so that I can actually access it on my main machine. So we notice here that the dev container can have some holes poked into it, and that's fine as long as those holes are on purpose, like with this network port that actually makes the dev container feasible and allows you to run the code and check out your web application on your main machine. But you have to make sure that this dev container is safe enough for you to use it with the unleashed versions of all of these AI agents. So now that you know the basics of dev containers together with these unleashed AI agents, go try it out for yourself. And you know that with this approach, you'll be safe no matter how much malware is trying to attack you via all these kinds of scripts that try to manipulate AI agents. You already are using dev containers, which makes you an AI native engineer, so keep it up. And if you want to learn more strategies like this, definitely check out the link below to access that demo project, and I'll see you in the AI native engineering community.